Neptune, the path to spirituality. So the spiritual journey is individual, highly personal. It can be organized or regulated. It can't be organized or regulated. It isn't true that everyone should follow one path. Listen to your own truth. So already you can see how working with your Uranus energy and tuning into your individuality is going to help you when you get into Neptune's realm and you're leaning into your spirit. Kind of both are requiring us to turn inward and really get familiar with who our soul is and came here to be. Neptune theory, it's how you need to spiritualize your life. So when we look at your sign, house, and aspects, that paints a picture of like what your spiritual path would look like. And not everybody's is the same. I have some examples and they can be vastly different, and you will all wind up in spirit. So judging our spiritual path according to other people just like doesn't fly in the Neptunian realm. Based on where our soul is in its larger evolution, there is something we need to claim to ascend our soul. So somewhat like Uranus, where we first start by receiving our layer of conditioning, Neptune also requires us to like take a step forward in some way. And in doing that step forward, it will be a spiritual access point. So again, we have to look into the exact chart to see what exactly is that. And probably it's something that's been missing from previous lifetimes, or something in a previous lifetime that you started or wanted but didn't actually fulfill. Neptune is now putting that thing right at the start of your spiritual path. So if you want to get there, if you want to lean into your soul, you're going to have to go through whatever that experience is. So Neptune moves even a little bit slower than Uranus, with spending 14 years per sign. So that's long. Pluto is the only other one that can be in a sign longer, but it's 9 to 30 years. So it's not always longer than Neptune. Neptune is the ruling planet of Pisces and the 12th house. Neptune, much like Uranus, retrogrades once per year for about 5 to 6 months at a time. So same as Uranus, about half of people have it retrograde in their chart. And I got to think a retrograde Neptune means your spiritual journey will be of even higher priority to you in your focus. That'll just kind of always be a constant, like how can I lean more towards my soul and doing what my soul came here to do. That's my own interpretation. I haven't read that anywhere necessarily, just based on my own Neptune retrograde in my chart. Neptune return happens at 165 years. So much like Uranus, you're probably only going to experience your Neptune opposition, and that's if you live 7-8 decades. So that isn't something everybody sees, but I would imagine is a spiritual turning point. Also, the squares that happen. So you would have a square in your 40s, I think thereabouts. And that is, again, contributing to that midlife crisis, 40 to 50 years old turning point that we apparently go through. And I think that Neptune square probably plays its part, just like the Uranus opposition. Okay, so in mythology, Neptune is Poseidon, god of the sea. That's why the little symbol on your natal chart looks like a trident, because it is the god of the sea, and that plays into ruling Pisces, which is often the ocean is symbolism used for Pisces, Neptune as well. Because we're kind of in that Pisces realm, a lot of these will sound familiar. Neptune and Pisces sharing these characteristics, but Neptune, its skill is illusion and disillusion, escapism and reality. I say reality because if I asked you all, like, what is reality, we would get as many different answers as each person is in the group. So reality is subjective. the very nature of our experience on this life is subjective. And that's Neptune's realm, where you really can't know anything for sure. Knowledge is very slippery. Feeling, though, is how you would navigate this space, is by connecting to the truth of your emotions and listening for your inner authority, and not necessarily going by reality, because we know reality is one giant illusion that each of us are experiencing individually. So our spirit's evolutionary needs and blockages. So again, I say, like, when we have to claim something, we have to go through a specific experience. Every time we incarnate, our soul wants to move forward. If you study Dolores Cannon's materials at all, especially her book, Between Death and Life, so highly recommend. We come into this earth and into this physical life because we can evolve faster in a physical plane than we can in a non-physical plane. So when we look at our Neptune placement, we're understanding what level of spiritual evolution, what thing did we come to claim so that we can make it to the next rung of our spiritual evolution. It's also consciousness itself. So again, we're getting into this place where everything merges back into one, like water. It's fluid and it's all connected. Neptune and our emotions are how we merge with universal forces. So we can harness the collective consciousness and we can transcend our human limitations through our emotional energy and connecting with that higher power. Neptune and all the specifics, the sign, the house, the aspects, it is your individual soul's climb up the mountain. So you imagine this mountain that is spirituality, and at the top is re-merging with source or, universe, whatever. Every single person is going to tackle this mountain a little differently. Like, picture one side of the mountain is covered in snow. A different side of the mountain is a forest covered in trees. And a different side of the mountain is just pure rocks and straight up. And every single person is built to approach the top from a different angle. And that's why we can't compare our spiritual path with somebody else's, or somebody who says, like, you need to meditate or you have to do yoga or you have to blah, blah, blah. Like, there is no have to, because just because one person is built to go up this side of the mountain, you might be built to go up a completely different side. So really, we have to turn inward to find this path, because nobody else knows. Only our soul knows who we came here to be. And Neptune can really help us by helping us to understand what our unique path might look like. Any of those, the things on the path are going to spark and provoke spiritual growth. That is the whole point of understanding your Neptune placement, is what your spiritual growth is bound to look like. I like this last concept of uniting ego and soul equals ego strength. There's a lot out there about the bad rap that ego gets and how we need to shed our ego or let go of our ego. And it's really, I don't think it's like that. From what I've put together, our ego is a vehicle that allows our soul to move through this physical world and enact and express whatever it is that we came here to express. The problem with the ego is when we leave it all in the unconscious and we don't consciously choose what our ego is doing. Our ego wants things, it has desires. It wants a promotion at work, it wants a relationship, it wants a house, it wants all of these things. And those things aren't wrong, because they give us the foundation to pursue our spiritual mission here in this world. So these are some examples of how your spiritual path might look different just based on the sign. And these are just a few examples. So like pilgrimage, this would be a Neptune and Sagittarius example. Pilgrimage meaning maybe you fly halfway around the world and you go to Nepal and you find these monks and you go visit them and you see this place. That would be a pilgrimage. Like, you're physically putting yourself through a physical journey to seek spirituality. That is very much within the realm of Sagittarius. Meanwhile, maybe if your Neptune's in Virgo, you volunteer in the community twice a week, every single week. your whole entire life. And someone with Neptune and Sag could look at that and say, you're missing it. You're not seeing the world. You need to get out there. You need to experience different cultures and all of that. And the Virgo person's like, no, I don't. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm being of service in my life and I'm putting myself out there. I'm dedicated to the things I'm passionate about. And then we have Scorpio, where sexuality and death, probably, but sexuality is more fun to talk about, is probably your path to spirituality. So your sexual partners bring forth a side of your spirit that otherwise you hadn't met yet. So there are so many sides to get up this mountain, and even just the sign doesn't tell us the whole story. The house is going to contribute. The aspects of what else is it talking to can tell you, again, like how prevalent your spiritual pursuits might be in your world. But yeah. And then Neptune healing. So when you're working in this space of energy, it's a lot more subtle than Uranus. For one, it's moving slower. So when it's transiting one of your houses, that's a 14-year process now, not just a 7-year process. So the change happens much more gradually. And because it's such an internal journey, it is literally like one tiny step at a time. And so again, it's a very subtle change versus Uranus might be your marriage blows up one day, you get fired from your job, like something like that. And all of a sudden your whole life is different in an instant. This is kind of the opposite of that. In order to work with this energy on purpose, you can look up activating and following your intuition. That would be very much tied together with like how to practice your individual spiritual path, would be to find your intuition. If you're not already connected with it, there's lots of resources out there of people talking about how to get in touch with your intuition. But then your intuition will basically guide you. It'll tell you what you need to do. It'll call your heart to buy a bus and remodel it so you can live on the road, and try that for a while. And maybe that is your spiritual experience. Whatever it is, your heart will tell you, your intuition will tell you. Neptune is also given credit for our psychic abilities. I personally subscribe to the belief that all of us have psychic capabilities, and it's just a matter of how much we're listening to them and have the volume turned up on them. But as you tap into your intuition, there's really no way around turning your psychic abilities up louder in your awareness. So just beware that kind of comes with that territory, but it also is, it can be really nice. There's a lot of safety and security that we find the deeper we get into our spiritual path, and we're able to connect with our ancestors and our spirit guides and all of those spiritual resources that are there all the time. But when we're not listening to our intuition, we're not tuned into our spiritual path, we may be missing the support that they're giving us. Neptune transcends what it means to be human, basically. It's the closest that we're going to get to remerging with source while we're still physical. And again, that's going to look different for everyone, depending on what sign and house and all of that. Collective consciousness healing, this kind of goes back to that same idea we talked about with Uranus, where it's not just good news for me. You know, any good news for me is always good news for the collective. And same here, like any soul level healing, any steps forward that you take on your spiritual path is positively impacting collective consciousness healing. So they are very much correlated. So you're driving mass consciousness healing just by doing your own spiritual work. Embrace sensitivity. This is where I feel like I am on the path. Because when you tune into your intuition and when you really open up your emotions and let them flood into your life, they can be overwhelming, and they can cause you to do things in the moment that maybe as you look back on it, you're like, yeah, that was an emotional decision and my emotions got away from me, and that's what it is. And that sensitivity, even though sometimes, especially early on when we're just learning how to work with that energy, maybe we're not that great at it. Maybe it's difficult or uncomfortable, or scares the living shit out of us. Whatever it may be, that sensitivity not only brings us into that space where we're having to face those fears, but like I said, on the other side of it is all of that spiritual support and power and true security that we can find by turning into what our emotions and intuition has to say to us. I thought this was interesting. One of the videos I listened to on Neptune said the main obstacle to our spiritual path or to evolving our spirit is attachment that the ego holds. So that would be like my friend who stayed in her bad marriage until he cheated on her and blew it up. She didn't want to admit defeat. She didn't want to get divorced. She was already divorced. She didn't want to be twice divorced. That's an ego thing. The spirit doesn't care how many times you get married or divorced. The ego is worried about the reputation that comes with being twice divorced. So that attachment to, I'm afraid of having that as my descriptor, it caused her multiple more years in that marriage and then a very painful end to it. So the ego keeps us stuck. The ego's attachments keep us stuck. So again, the more you're wanting to lean into your spirit and your soul's path and like fulfilling your soul's mission, it requires us to be honest with ourselves and to let go of anything that our ego is clinging to out of fear of what others are going to think, or, you know, whatever it might be, which again, this is very much where I am as well. Letting go of lots of things is hard. Letting go of anything is difficult. So this is again where Neptune is a very gradual process. We lean 1 millimeter a day in the right direction of connecting more authentically with our soul, and give it 14 years. And yeah, you're way further down that path. So giving ourselves grace and compassion is kind of key anytime we step into the spiritual world and working with becoming who our soul wanted us to be. You know, you got to think like, if it wasn't going to be great, our soul wouldn't have gone through all the trouble of manifesting this body and this life and all the effort that went into us being here. They must have had something really magical in mind. So it's probably not going to be quote unquote easy, but in the end, oh, so worth it.